Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Irvine International Academy regularly scheduled board meeting. It's August 22nd, 2023, and we're meeting at the school site, which is 4782 Karen Ann Lane here in Irvine, California. We're going to begin with a roll call vote as we call the meeting to order, and we'll do it in sequence of our minutes, beginning with myself, Doug Hewson, and I'm present. Brett Freeman. Present. Online from 22737 Bullyroot Avenue, Maple Ridge, British Columbia, Canada, is Miller Zhang.
Present.
Thank you. David Sun, we expect shortly, but we will note him as not present at the moment, but probably coming in. Felipe Delgado.
Present.
Thank you. And Molly Chen.
Present.
Thank you all. Say happy brand new school year, and I'll ask for a volunteer that would be willing to lead us in our Pledge of Allegiance. The flag is for guests to their right and for us to our left. Is there someone who'd like to lead that today?
I will volunteer.
Thank you.
Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. For board members, we had opportunity to look at the agenda. Any suggested edits or order or sequence change that anybody desires? Let me know. If not, we'll ask for a motion to approve the agenda as we have planned. Motion approved. Thank you. And I'll ask for a second.
Second.
And the roll call vote will go from my left to right. Molly Chang.
Yes.
Yeah. And Doug Hewson is a yes. Going online. Miller.
Yes.
Thank you. And Brett Freeman.
Aye.
And Felipe Delgado.
Yes.
Great. And agenda is approved as it stands. We're going to have a brief, and it truly will be brief, closed session. We are putting a bow on a ongoing topic that was for potential litigation. I think we'll come to a conclusion on that. And then we have the contracts for our employees to review. And we'll be back forecasting about 15 minutes. That's a pretty good forecast. Welcome back to the Irvine International Academy board meeting on August 22nd. Time back in at 6:38, and we're finishing Roman numeral number 2, closed session items, reporting out the board ratified a settlement agreement and voted in the following way. Doug Hewson made a motion and voted yes. Brett Freeman voted yes. Miller Zhang, yes. Felipe Delgado, yes. And Molly Chang, yes. And I'm happy to report there's now, at least at this moment, no pending or no litigation. So we should see that fall off of our agenda. Secondly, we had the opportunity to review all of the contracts for the remaining teacher contracts and especially the teacher aides, as well as special positions. And a motion was made by Felipe Delgado. Molly Chang and Miller argued about who was second, but Molly won. And the vote went consistent with the prior vote. From top to bottom, Doug Hewson was a yes, Brett Freeman's a yes, Miller was a yes, Felipe was a yes, and Molly Chen was a yes as well. So that concludes closed session items 2 and our item number 3 report out. Brings us to item 4 for comments from public for non-agenda items. We'll take a moment to survey Mary Beth or others in the room. Any comments? Okay, we'll move on then to Roman numeral 5, perhaps the best part of our meeting. We get to hear an executive director report and followed by a fiscal update and report. And so Dr. Bean, we're excited. Happy new school year.
Yes, excited. So we are on our tomorrow will be our 5th day. So we only had 4 days of school. And our current enrollment, butts and seats is what we call it, right? We've actually enrolled in our school. Right now stands at 359. And then we have 14 students whose families called and said they'll be here they're just still in China or another country. So those are students that were enrolled and plan to attend in a future date. So we will change their enrollment date the day when they arrive. So that's 359 plus 14 brings us at 373. And then we have opened up spots for more kinder students to come in. I think we just offered 7. And then we have people, each of these last 4 days actually just walk in and enroll their kids. So we will reach our goal of 377 for this year. I don't doubt that. And so let me just remind you that last year at this time, our first day of school, we started with 192. And then by the time, I think we're at 205. So from 205 to now 359 for sure, and another 14 for sure. That's tremendous growth. So we should celebrate that. Yeah.
Those 14 students, the ones you were talking about, can you give an average what grade level those?
Yeah, great question. We have one that's in 7th grade. So it's great because our 7th grade that we just opened, we now have, I believe, 11. So when this other student comes back, we'll have 12 in 7th grade. And then it's just sprinkled throughout, mainly like kinder, first, we have a few sprinkled in 3rd grade, 1 in 5th grade. So it's sprinkled throughout because they're like families that have siblings that are still out.
I hate to interrupt you first. I'll just slip this in. Since they haven't begun with us, do we suffer the absentee count with them, or do we avoid that? Or do we
Great
manage
question.
it?
No, they're not considered absent because they haven't officially showed up at school. Once they officially showed up at the school for the first day, then they're enrolled. And then should they be absent after that, then it's considered absent.
Are any of those 14 supposed to be in classes that are full?
Yes, we have a few that actually are in classes that are pretty full right now, which is 2nd grade and 3rd and 4th grade especially.
And what's our policy on a date, cutoff date? You know, comes a point because they say that they're coming, but
Yeah. No, we, those families that we have heard no response from is 3 days and then we drop. But since these families actually were proactive and reached out to us and continue to reach out to us and say, no, we're coming, we're just out of the States. We keep those until the day that they said that they're coming. They actually gave us dates of return.
okay,
So when the dates of return come and they have showed up, the next day we will call.
okay. So we're tracking that.
Yep. Yep, Sai is doing a great job tracking that, yeah. Any other questions about enrollment? So we're pretty, OCD is like amazed that we have, so many new students. I know that Charter Capital is very happy to see our enrollment. They congratulated us today. They're very happy to see us increase and grow so much. But with that, then it really challenges our school in terms of how we do morning drop-offs and pickups and meals and recesses and assemblies. So we have to count for almost 80% more traffic and students. And so, the first day was a little bit of a mess, but usually first days of schools are. The second day was 180-degree turnaround because we met with the staff, we discussed, we problem solved on how to make things more, how to make things flow better. And since then, our parents have been trained, we've been doing a better job and things are looking really good. Dismissals and even morning drops off are much faster, I believe, than it was even last year because we just have the traffic flowing, we just keep it flowing. So families can just drop off and just pick up and we'll call the students to the front line when they get in the car. So lunch has been, we worked out some hurdles in the first day. But after those challenges, every student's being served a meal that wants a meal. And then we're going to be offering more hot lunches and hopefully more variety since the vendor we chose merged with another vendor. Is that correct, Mary Beth? So they should have more offerings. Okay. so that's with that. We're fully staffed, other than hiring 3 unanticipated teachers aide. So we need to hire them because our class sizes are larger. And so that's a good thing. But other than that, we're fully staffed. Teachers are properly credentialed or have the necessary credentials to teach in those classrooms. We have a open house, we have back to school night on Thursday. And so our staff will get to meet the families and share about their routines and syllabus and all those kinds of things.
I heard that no children.
Yeah, no children. Usually back to school night, there's no children so that the teacher can just give the parents the presentation.
That'd be good, because I've seen the previous ones with the children, it's just,
Yeah, it's actually, believe it or not, it's always been without children, but parents bring children anyway, so.
yeah,
But,
well,
yeah.
no, it's good to know.
Yeah.
You know, 'cause I think you're right, you can't reduce some of the Vita.
Yeah.
There's too much going on.
Yeah, too much going on. So I'll send another message to remind our families, find childcare. So it's just supposed to be parents.
I volunteer at the Delgado almost.
Okay, yeah.
They can go.
I don't know if you want to do that. But PTO certainly, they're gonna bring hand-me-down uniforms to give out for free. So we'll spread out here on the NPR. PTO has been very helpful, and they've actually increased in their membership significantly as well. Naturally, they should because we have increasing enrollment, but it just seems that there's more participation this year. Next steps for us is that I'm working with our attorneys to begin the process for countywide charter. I'd like to have a strategy meeting with no more than 2 of you guys around how we should do that. Whether we want to do it under Western Immersion Mandarin Charter School or do another kind of, structure. So we can open up now other schools across Orange County. So whoever, offline, let me know, no more than 2 of you. Okay,
Volunteer right now?
Felipe wants to volunteer right now. I think that's great. Let me know who else. Brett? Okay, so we'll make note of that. Molly's around anyways, because Molly's, well, by the way, big kudos to Felipe, who's been really helping our teachers get classrooms set up, especially our STEAM lab. And he's been around almost, every day of the start of school, which is great, just his presence. And so that help has been tremendous. So thank you, Felipe. And then Molly is actually going to come in and support some of our new teachers and with their transition into teaching, right? Classroom management. So we thank you for your time. You're going to come in the morning and Mr. Fernandez is going to reach out to you. Speaking of Mr. Fernandez, he is our Director of Student Services. You met him, he was here just now. He's done a great job stepping up into the leadership role. Since we don't have an assistant principal, he's pretty much next in line. And so he's handling lots of things that involve student services. All of our service needs in regards to independent studies, parent, relations, all kinds of things. So he's doing a great job. And as well as the team that you have here. So Ms. White has been an amazing addition. I didn't realize how much we needed to do in that department until she arrived, right? It's great to actually have somebody here to do this work and do it right. And I'm not saying that our previous predecessors didn't do it right. I'm just saying that, there's a lot on our plate and we discussed. So it's great to have you here, Ms. White, for sure. And then Mary Beth, of course, continues to just build upon the work that she did last year in terms of her role as business manager. We're very, very blessed to have her on our team who keeps the backbone of the office running. So I think we have really good operations here. So much so that I'm really thinking I'm certainly ready to get this countywide charter thing going and start opening up schools.
I don't know what you're waiting for.
I'm waiting for this committee, ad hoc committee to get together. So let's get that going. That's our goal. And then grow our middle school. So we're pretty excited about that, the teachers that we got in middle school. I think that's my report. Anything from you? Any questions from you guys?
Just a quick reflection from you on the sense of team building as the teachers and other staff members came back a little bit early. What did you notice and what did you see? We knew what you were going to do. We saw the agenda, but how did you feel about it? And how did they feel?
Yeah, that's a great question. This year, remember, this year is really focused on upping our instructional rigor in both Mandarin and writing. And so the retreat, when we had the teachers back 5 days before school started, most of that retreat was content-driven professional development, which is great. We did certainly have time for team building, but most of the teams returned anyway. So, we didn't have much to build there. Molly was part of that first day, so she could share her comments. But I think we had a great retreat, and the teachers had plenty of time to plan and get their classrooms ready.
I appreciate that, especially kind of like the icebreaking meetings that we did together. And I think it's teacher can also use the same thing in their own classrooms. To see the teacher, with matter kind of personality, they have shine more and more, open their mouth and share and some questions that are actually quite personal. You can go a little deeper and open up.
Yeah.
And the language, the writing training was happening.
Yeah, actually, that I want to mention that. So both our writing consultant, amazing. All the teachers just blown away by her. And then our Mandarin consultant, the Mandarin teachers that I'm working with her, wow, they've felt very supported and very aligned with the vision of Mandarin this year. One thing though, be transparent with is we really need to up our game on science. So we're really trying to figure out whether science should be taught in Mandarin or English. If it's taught in English, that means we have to give up something to be taught in Mandarin. So right now though, one step at a time, priority is build a very strong Mandarin language art program where our students can listen, speak, and read Mandarin, and then build the content subject area of like either science or social studies in Mandarin, but that'll come further on. So Pearl's really helping with them, and she'll be here at the end of September for a whole week and in person, and then we're going to do Mandarin literacy night for all of our families at the end of September. So we're excited about that.
Where's she based?
Her organization is in New York, but she has a team here in Orange County. But she's mainly been supporting our teachers through a lot of Zoom training this past week. I can't believe it's only been a week, but it feels like a month we've been doing this. So
We appreciate the report. Thank you.
Of course.
Great executive report. We're moving on to part of our informational items with Delano Jones and North Compass. Do I get that right, Delano?
Yes, sir, you did. Good evening, everyone.
Hello.
It's so good to see you all again. Congrats on starting a new school year. Mary Beth, if you could allow me to share screen, please, for just a second.
There you go.
I did share with Miller, in case if you guys can see this huge gash upside my head. I did share with him that I was the first casualty of the weather over the weekend. I tripped and fell on Saturday and busted myself in the head, somewhat preparing for the weather that never really materialized, but nonetheless, in case you were wondering.
Coming out of a cantina or something?
Yeah, that curb was a doozy, right? Yeah, I think it was that bag of sand that grabbed my foot, David. And I'm sorry, that was Felipe, I think. I don't think David is there. Felipe, and just took me for a spill. Nonetheless, I am here, and I am okay. Again, I want to congratulate Dr. Bean and staff for getting the year together, getting ready. You know, we didn't, you know, the summer came and went, and obviously, you know, the school and being in contact and having that connectivity was always there. So I never felt like we were ever out of touch. So I won't say necessarily welcome back to him and Mary Beth per se, but to everyone else, welcome back to the board as well, and to the staff who have not yet met. Hopefully we'll get to meet in the near future, hopefully at the next board meeting. I'll dive into the financials again. And if you recall, when I was up there back in June/July, I talked about, you know, year end and what that, you know, may entail, and some of those moving parts and things like that. I'll preface this by saying that we know that coming into this year, and as well as being in this year, that there were lots of things that were carryover from the initial startup year that was going to play itself out this year, and we're seeing the end results of those things, right? And so, you know, a lot has transpired, obviously, in terms of, you know, getting the school back settled, right? That was the most important part, and I think Dr. Bean and his team has done a tremendous job of that, and that's reflected in the enrollment that you see. And as I've always stated, that I promise you, you won't get families to show up at your school if they don't feel like it's a welcoming place and a place that they belong. And that's indicative of the turnaround in the enrollment. And I am so excited about that, because I know that's going to be the catalyst and the driver for all the great things that are going to happen to the school. This is the year that, you know, we make that turn, you know, because we're now right back to where that enrollment really should be. And now we're going to see that, you know, come to fruition as we go throughout this year and the out years coming. You know, as I mentioned, with the growth that's here, there's no way that this school can fail without us purposely doing so. I'll sort of look at where we are. And again, as we mentioned, you know, these are somewhat preliminary, but I'll go right to the bottom line and kind of show you this number here, which is our net loss for the year, which is about $1,022,000. You can kind of see where this shakes out in most of these expenditures here, right? So there was an uptick in salaries in terms of those increases to sort of get us on track with the salary schedule in both certificated and classified. Personnel expenses obviously is related to that. So any uptick there in those, in terms of additional support that was needed for the school, would be reflected here in terms of STRS, benefits, things like that. Books and supplies, again, as we mentioned here, you know, you can see the overage and the excess there. Our total services and operational expenses here, about $425,000 over. Again, a lot of this related to, again, as I mentioned, things that occurred, you know, the prior year that, again, you know, had to be washed out in this year in terms of additional expenses that hit the income statement. All in all, we received $3.5 million in revenues. And you can see, for the most part, this 100,000 here, that's the excess from the about 10 additional students that we had budgeted that never materialized. So that's what you're seeing there. On the federal side, there's some revenues here that we had budgeted in terms of that we could not recognize just because there are no expenditures related to those. And that's something Dr. Bean and I will be addressing in this fiscal year, in terms of making sure that we have expenditures that we can categorize towards that to a larger degree. One of the big things that we're going to do with that is finish off the PCSGP grant. So some of what you see here that we could not recognize is related to that. And so we'll make sure that we spend that up this year, because we have until February of 2024 to do that. But this is the best time to do it, because at the onset of the school year, we can capture a lot of those expenditures in terms of, you know, thank God we have a 7th grade, I believe, that was added. So all of that curriculum can be charged to the grant because it's not a reoccurring expense. And there's so many moving parts with that. But if there's a takeaway from that, is that you cannot charge any reoccurring expenditures, only additional, supplemental, or new expenditures. Local revenues of $462,000. Half of that is really your special education revenues. And again, as I mentioned down here, you can see the net loss in terms of that being $1,022,000. And over here, you can see here where the bulk of that really went here in personnel expenditures, and then obviously here in services and other operating expenditures. Cash, which became a huge issue this year, right? And you know, and I will say that because, you know, again, Dr. Bean just mentioned that, you know, we sort of went back to the table with Charter Schools Capital, and again, for a number of reasons, right? Because when you have so much that's going out but less coming in, obviously, you know, you're going to have this deficit here in terms of just having not enough cash to meet your obligations. So we started back, I believe, in July, if I'm not mistaken, in terms of having that first initial funding, and we'll sort of go back to that plan that we had in year one to sort of sustain ourselves for the first half of the year, because we won't see the revenues for those new students until March. So that's quite a long time to go before we actually get that true up in terms of property taxes and state aid. So we're still being funded on last year's P2 ADA, which was, I believe, Dr. Bean, 212.
Yes.
Yes. Right, so we're being funded on that, but we have to have it. We're funding 348 students, right, on that number. So you can imagine that there's a huge a deficit when it comes to cash in terms of having that to meet our needs, and so that's the reason why we're going back there. And again, to touch on this. And, you know, we can certainly stretch this out and sort of look at some of those things. And, you know, we can certainly do that if the need arises. But most of those expenditures, as I said, that were excess overage were related to some of the things from the 2020-21 school year. And obviously the increases and things like that that we put in for staff and things like that, and additional staff that were brought on throughout the course of the year. I'll jump over to the balance sheet really quickly. And I'll show you a couple of things. As I mentioned, there's if you look at this, we started the year at 427,000 in cash and then ended the year at 429. So there's no movement there in cash at all. In fact, it went down by 3,000, right? So you can just imagine having this much going through that plus that, right? As we look at our here, you can see our cash of 427,000. We have receivables here, and these are things that are due from the state that we have not yet been paid for 243,000. We do have some prepaid expenses here of $33,000, puts our total assets at just around $700,000. But as we jump down here, we can sort of see a couple of things that I want to mention, right? So our accounts payable, these are just your normal everyday accounts payable transactions, things that have not yet been cleared. Salaries here as well, accrued salaries and STRS expenses. We have 512 in accounts for in AR sales. This is the amount that we now owe back to Charter Schools Capital as of the end of June. Obviously, that was paid back, so then there's a new amount. So we're looking at June here in terms of what that number was at the end of June. Our revolving loan for 187,000, which we know that's scheduled. And then we have about 561,000 in unearned revenue. And again, this is what I mentioned here in terms of revenues that we've received the revenues, but we do not have the expenses yet to match up with those revenues, and they're highly restrictive. So we sort of leave this here, and as we go through the course of this coming year, you know, we'll spend this down, which will be nice because then we're not eating into our unrestricted revenues. So I'm hoping that, you know, if we can get this spent down, some of that, you know, obviously is highly restricted because some of those donors and things like that that provided those resources have specific needs for them, right? And so we sort of have to stay in line with that. 30,000 here in a liability for vacation or sick leave. And then our total liabilities of 1.5 million here, you subtract that from our 700,000 in assets. Net assets puts our fund balance here at a deficit of 823,000. And as I mentioned in year one, and I'll say this again now, someone asked me in year one, hey, Delano, do you think that we'll be able to survive and get ourselves out of this hole? And I said that then unequivocally in the affirmative, like absolutely yes. And I will say that again before even the question is asked. Absolutely, yes. I have absolutely no doubt that we'll be able to turn this thing around. And again, as we, you know, I talked about quite a bit last year that this is the year that we were going to see that pain come to fruition, right? Because so much happened in year one that carried into year two, still somewhat there, in terms of some of those things. But overall, I think most of that is behind us, and hopefully not to return in that way. But the school will be on solid footing, as we go through the course of this year, and hopefully, the net income that we have. And again, I'm not promising you that the end of next year that this 800,000 netting total asset that's a deficit will be back to positive. It will take some time for that to happen, but you didn't get into this issue overnight. So it will take time in terms of the resources that you currently have, plus the future resources that you will get from increased growth, expansion, etc., that will then make this all come together nicely. And again, this is, what I see here is, in my opinion, if I were looking at this as an independent outsider, this is what a second year charter looks like that stubbed its toe in year one, right? Or that slipped and fell out the gate, had some challenges along the way. This is what you see here, right? Also, some of this is capacity building. We added a middle school, right? So some of that certainly plays into this as well. I'll take questions if there are any. I'll pause there for questions. Let me say that. I'll pause there for questions, and I'll bring up the check register if there are none. But I certainly hope that you guys will at least have some questions or any feedback, and I'll pause and take those if there are any.
A couple easy ones, Delano. When do you anticipate the fiscal year being final? Would we generally have that September board meeting? We'll close out June 30th in the year?
Yes. So as of today, it's, I've instructed my staff to not post anything else. There are a couple of journal entries that I'm going to make. It's not going to necessarily impact the bottom line in a material way. It's just moving some things between the funds from unrestricted to restricted, etc. So that's not going to impact, this net income that I'm showing down here in terms of this deficit. But it's closed 95%. Chairman, if I can say it that way. The unaudited actuals I will produce for your authorizer and yourselves. The compliance due date is the 15th. Your authorizer would like that, I believe, on the 11th of September. And then we will bring it to your board. I believe your board meeting is September 19th. So we'll approve it then. But we'll meet compliance by submitting it to your authorizer on September 11th. In essence, this is a fairly good look at it. What won't change will be the revenue numbers, because I have all the accruals for these already. Down here, it's just more or less, did something come in that should not have been posted here? It's going through my review right now. I'll take a deep dive into what staff has already done, just to make sure that that's all correct. But I'm pretty confident that we're about 95% to almost to 99% of the way. Once I do my review and I officially sign off on it, then we'll run the unaudited actuals.
Yeah, well, I'm on a roll. I'll slip in a second one. I think it'll be fairly quick. Do you remember approximately how much of the grant has not been applied yet, or that we've not?
For the PCSGP grant, we're roughly about 300,000 left, and we'll spend that up this year, because we'll have the expenditures that we can put towards it. I'll give you a little tidbit of insight here what the state is doing. They did get a little more flexible, because, and again, this grant is extremely misleading to most people in that, it's they promise you $600,000, but it's a reimbursement grant. So essentially you should have the $600,000 to pay up front, then you're sort of getting backfill for that, right? But the year over year, it's so extremely hard because there are only certain things that qualify for the grant. This year, there was an extension to February for that particular reason, because it was just so hard for schools to spend the money because of all the restrictions that are there. So the state of California went back to the federal government and said, hey, look, we need more time. There's no way that these schools will be able to spend this much money considering. So they gave us until February of 24 to do that. So that really, and with a little bit more relaxed restrictions, if I can put it that way. And I was on that call today, and I mentioned that to Dr. Bean. I was on a call today with the staff there, and that's one of the things again that came up was, you know, hey, look, some of the restrictions that were in place before, they're no longer going to be under that high of a scrutiny, so we shouldn't have a problem rolling through that. In fact, I would like to be able to kind of get this all wrapped up before, you know, the winter break happens, so that way we're not carrying this into January or February, which is when this will officially have been spent.
Hi, Delano. Hope you're doing well.
Yes, I don't know who's speaking. I believe
Brent.
that's Brent.
It's Brett.
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for your help with all this. My question is, the first school year, do you remember what the enrollment number was that the budget was based on?
Yes, 420.
420?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh boy, that was easy.
The budget.
Any other comments, questions for Delano? Looks pretty content around here. Miller, just to double check online. Oh, it's good.
Now clear. Yeah.
I'll show you a couple more documents, check registers. You're looking at check register for July. And again, I always want to be as transparent as possible. You guys do have this information. And I just want to make sure that at least everyone gets a chance to review it, ask questions. As you can see, it was quite a busy month in terms of quite a bit of things getting prepped to start the school year. $275,811 in warrants for July.
Dr. Reed, it's a question for you. On some of these reimbursements, I know in the first year, even the second year, there was some question about reimbursement and the policies. Do you hear any rumblings, any discontent around that, or is that all clear?
No, in fact, reimbursement to teachers are just.
Yeah, to teachers and what was reimbursable and what wasn't, and
Yeah.
there was some frustration mainly.
Yeah, no, we, in fact, last year, we gave a limit to teachers, but this year, because I know enrollment's increased, we're gonna get back to normal year. I typically, in all my principalships, I never gave a limit. I just said, look, we will provide what our students need. So if you need construction paper in the classroom, our job is to provide that, we will. And so I didn't put any limit on the teachers. They've come to us, Mary Beth and I, and if it's reasonable that that's what we would expect students to have, I approve it. So we've only had like 1 or 2 incidences where a teacher's asked for something like, you know, that they probably shouldn't be asking for, and they know better. And so I just say, no, we can't do that because I couldn't do that for all the teachers. So, but no, we haven't had any concerns, right, Beth? Have you?
No.
They've gotten what they've asked for this year, right?
Everything.
No.
And if I could just echo something to that note as well, because I know in most schools there is that challenge of resources for the classroom, right? And I always, you know, mention this, and I'm sure Dr. Bean and Mary Beth have heard this before, you know, we always put forth that effort to make sure that every teacher has all the resources that they need for their classroom. Because, you know, it's, you know, while it's great to have a PTO or to be able to lean on the parents, I think there is an obligation for the school to be able to meet the needs of every student by providing all of the resources that are necessary, whether it's in the classroom or out of the classroom. So I do support Dr. Bean in that effort to make sure that every staff member, if their needs and their reason, obviously, if you came in and asked for, you know, something really grand, you know, it would probably have to have a much deeper conversation. But in the normal everyday routine of items for the classroom, I can guarantee you that, you know, Dr. Bean and myself, if it's vetted with me, you know, we always make sure that, or we look to make sure that staff has those needs met.
Great. Well, we thank you for the fiscal update, the check registers, and Dr. B, thank you for that report as well. Any final questions for Delano before we free him up?
Don't just get ready, Delano, for this year.
A
There's a lot of action this year.
lot going on.
Yes, sir. I am looking forward to it. As I mentioned before, you know, I want to see you guys succeed in every way possible. And I know you will, because, you know, we're starting to prove that once again. And I'm excited about this year, Philippe, because I believe we're going to do some great things and you're going to be leading that charge.
And I'm gonna see you this year, right? You're gonna come visit us, right?
Absolutely, you will. If it weren't for this here, I would be there today, but I was instructed to not drive or that kind of thing, because I did have a concussion, so
There's nothing
Yeah.
like getting the Delano report in person.
absolutely. And I love to be in person. You know, I am a people person, man. So I look forward to seeing you guys in September for sure. I'll be there.
Yeah, me too.
Yes.
A double line.
Well, thanks again, Delano. We appreciate you too.
Awesome.
We're going to
Blessings
move
to
on
all.
to our consent agenda items, Roman numeral 6 on the consent agenda. Simply the previous board meeting minutes. If you had an opportunity to review those, we'll just approve those. Any changes that anybody saw? I'll move then that we approve the minutes. Can I ask for a second? Okay. We'll go roll call vote left to right. Molly?
Yes.
And there is a yes. Miller?
Yes.
Brett? And Felipe?
Yes.
Meetings approved from August 1st, the meeting earlier this. Now we have discussion and action items. We'll invite any public comments. The single item under Roman numeral 7 is the new employer contribution strategy for employee health and welfare plans. We'll invite Dr. Bean to share with us. Any public comments at this point? Great, then we'll hear from our executive director. And if there's any doctor that you want us to refer to, I think we had some posted, let us know. I'm excited about your research and where we're headed.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is another example of why we needed somebody like Ms. White to come and really help us analyze the benefit package that we have currently compared to what you know, is out there and what she's used to. So with that, I'm just going to turn over to Ms. White. She's going to introduce our new broker, and then we're going to go over a presentation of the analysis that we did for your guys' feedback.
Thank you, Dr. Bean. At this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Joe Phillips. He's the president of TCI Insurance Services. I had the pleasure of working with Joe and his team at my previous school for approximately 7.5 years. And I'll just turn it over to Joe to tell us what's going on.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Joe Phillips with TCIG. Thank you guys for having me and making time for us tonight. So as we look at the contribution strategy for schools as it's today, we provide $7,000 per year for each benefits eligible employee. And that approach feels fair on the surface when you look at it, right? Then we're giving an equal input to every employee, the $7,000. The challenge is that in this market segment, healthcare costs are based on age, right? Until you get up to 100 employees, it's based on the age of the individual. And so that means that there's substantial differences in the cost of the plans for various employees here. Right? And the cost can be as much as 3 times different between, say, you know, a 60-something-year-old and a 20-something-year-old. So we've got this equal input, but the cost of coverage is very different. So the output or outcome is very, very different between employees, right? And so we've got, you know, we've got equality, but not equity at the end of the day. And that's a, you know, it's a challenge, I think, sometimes for morale. And so there's the proposed approach that we suggest is moving to a model where the school based the contributions on a sort of a benchmark plan, right? Have a base plan that we use to determine the contribution for each employee. And so with that approach, the 22-year-old is going to get a contribution from the school that's equal to the cost of a 22-year-old age rate, and a 62-year-old gets a 62-year-old age rate. So we sort of flip that around. It's no longer an equal contribution for each person, but we solve for that equality or that equity piece instead, right? We have equal outcomes because the 22-year-old and the 62-year-old both are able to have the same level of healthcare with the contribution provided. In our proposed approach, we would have the school fund 100% of the employee-only cost for the Anthem Gold HMO Select Plan. We would have the school fund the base dental plan, which is the dental HMO plan, again for the employee only, the vision plan for the employee only. And this approach does a couple things. Number one, it's revenue neutral in year one. Number two, it does keep pace with the changes in the cost of healthcare over time. Right now, if healthcare goes up 5 points a year or 10 points a year, the employees bear the full brunt of that. Right, so this is revenue neutral to start, but it doesn't stay that way, and that's by design. It's meant to keep pace with the cost of healthcare. Currently, employees get sort of a double whammy because each year that contribution is worth less as the healthcare rate went up, but also they got hit with that birthday. Right, they went up to the next age band. Right, so this makes it a little bit more sustainable. The other thing is, from the teacher's perspective, it's just more fair. Right, the 22-year-old's not going to be super excited about this, perhaps, because they're going to get in real dollars less money for the coming year. But the 62-year-old is going to have a much more meaningful contribution. And I think that if you have a grown-up conversation with everyone, you can very clearly, sort of help people understand that if you look to your left and you look to your right, the person sitting next to you may have been paying, $500, $600, $700 just to get to the same baseline that you had covered 100%. And so even if you don't love it, you can understand that it's more fair. From the school's perspective, it's a great thing, especially in a building school, a school that's growing and expanding and in its nascency here, because it's critical to be able to attract and retain experienced staff. And with the current model where you provide that flat contribution, you essentially are penalizing your staff as they become more tenured. As they become more valuable to the school, more experienced, each year they're paying a little bit more for their coverage, while that younger staff member and teachers' aides and other folks are ecstatic because the contribution covers all of their costs and then some. Right, so it's more fair for the employees. It's it's better for the school as you try to grow and build the staff that you want to meet the objectives that you have for growth more broadly. And again, it's revenue neutral to start, but it's designed such that it keeps pace with costs as they expand. So I've got some exhibits that we can go through, but I think I should pause and take a breath and just see if there's any questions on what we've talked about so far.
So we have a comparison here, the current approach and the proposed approach. It's the current approach plan. We're talking about the same plan, but
so that there's two different exhibits, and I've got paper copies if anyone prefers that. But there's a chart that's yellow and gray, and then there's one that's all blue and gray. If you don't mind, tell me which one you're looking for, and we'll start there.
I'm just looking at the proposed. I guess it's the gray.
There's no yellow stripes?
No.
Okay, so on the left-hand side of that chart, you have there's kind of two ways that I think about revenue neutrality or the expense for this approach in general. And one is to think about what's the maximum commitment that schools made today. Right now, it's at $7,000 a year. And at the time that we put the renewal exhibits together, which are always lagging, right, to the real time, but there were 22 employees. And so we just simply extrapolated out 22 employees times $583. And we get to something like $12,800 a month as the maximum exposure that school has as it sits today. Right now, there's some of those employees that waive coverage, and there's that's not actually being spent today, but it's a good benchmark for what you've committed to already. The right side of that page looks at what if we instead took those same bodies, kind of everything is equal here, except we're going to say that the school is going to have their maximum exposure based on the cost of this Gold HMO Select Plan from Anthem. The three plans that I mentioned, the DHMO and the Vision plan, right? So those are all plans that are already offered in the portfolio today. It's just a matter that instead of the school just giving you this benefit bank, they're going to actually contribute an amount equal to the premium at your age for those three plans. And it shows that if everybody were to enroll, again, thinking about the maximum obligation, we'd be at something like 12.5, right? And so it shows that, give or take, sort of a margin of error that we're revenue neutral on that front. Does that make sense so far?
Yeah, but you say the current approach, do we actually have a simulation based on the current plans
of what people are actually
offers now based on, in comparison with what you're proposing?
Yeah, so the second page there that you should have has the yellow stripes on it.
You want just to pass out the paper?
Yeah, may I?
That part.
I'm not a paper person, but when it comes to things like this, it's easier. I don't mind passing this down. Okay, so for anybody who wasn't,
I'm sorry, for the record, this is in the board folder, just for the record.
yeah, this is just a printout of the same material. So the page that we were just talking about is the side with the blue and gray. The other side with the yellow looks at this from a different angle, right? So instead of thinking about what's your maximum obligation based on the commitment you've already made, it's thinking about based on all of the enrollments here that people actually made today, right? So if I've added my spouse or partner, if I've enrolled in an upgraded plan, sort of whatever I've done with those funds. This shows on the left-hand side, if we renewed the account just as it is, right? Carried every election forward, just using the renewal rates, the same plan options. It shows a breakdown of the employer, employee cost, and the total cost. The right side of that chart shows what that looks like under the proposed contribution strategy. Now, it's really important to understand that this is just another way of trying to get to the financial impact, but this is really a loose projection in a sense, because anytime we make a change to the contribution strategy, we should expect changes in the outcome, right? If I'm 22 years old and I had this $700 to spend, I could have enrolled in the richest plan on the medical, the richest plan on the dental, the richest plan in the vision, and maybe had some money left over, right? When all of a sudden I'm told, hey, if I want to go up to that platinum plan, I'm going to pay the difference between the base plan. I'm going to rethink that, right? I'm going to say, I didn't even go to the doc this year. Do I really need to be in that platinum plan, right? That's part of what my team does is, we're very hands-on with helping to consult with employees and educate them on the plans and how they work and help them make good decisions. And so we can kind of have that rational decision with the 22-year-old about, did you really need to have that platinum plan? I know you were in that last year, but of course you're going to spend whatever was handed to you. And so we would expect some migration. I'd expect that older employees are going to, may move up in tiers in some places, right? If all of a sudden I have a more meaningful contribution, I might have some health issues and I might have just picked the plan that I could afford because it fit my family's budget, even though it might not have been a good financial decision overall for the year, right? Some people, can never come up with $1,000 on the spot, but have $100 a month, right? And so that's just a reality of, family budgets. At the same time, again, those younger employees may migrate down towards the base plan. Your group is overwhelmingly enrolled in HMO, about half in the Kaiser plans and half in the Anthem plans. So we would expect some people to migrate around in there, but this does give you an example of ceteris paribus. If people just enroll in exactly what they're in today, this is how those two examples would play out. It is, again, within what I would consider to be a margin of error and, for the difference in cost between the two proposals in aggregate for the employer. The other thing that I'd suggest that further levels that playing field is that we, for the sake of simplicity here, we've already got a lot of numbers on the page. We didn't include dental and vision plan enrollments on that version. And so if I'm 22 and you see that I'm spending less than $583 on that chart, I almost certainly enrolled in the dental and vision that the school was paying for as part of my $7,000. Does that make sense?
So have we had an opportunity to poll in for the staff here to get some idea on the support of this?
I had an initial conversation with our lead team today, mentioning this whole idea, the difference between equality versus equity, and that we should certainly look at this from the needs of the many should outweigh the needs of the few when we're looking at an organizational viability in terms of the savings and whatnot. So of course the leads of the younger lead teachers had some questions. So I prepared them for next week when Joe comes on Wednesday that we're gonna have this discussion. I can think of a couple of teachers that this may be a problem for. Majority of the staff though, by the way, if you look at this, of all the employees pay the most out of pocket, and that's not to say that's why I'm in favor of this plan, but what I'm saying is that I'm willing to continue paying for what we need to pay for as long as it meets the needs of the organization. And so we look at the needs of the organization though, we don't see much of a difference. And I did like the one fact that you brought up, that as rates go up, the employer, who is taking the brunt of rates going up each year?
So right now, the employees do, right? Every time when you start this renewal conversation, we say, well, bad news, the rates went up 10 points. And our contribution bank is fixed at $7,000 a year, which means that for those employees that have contributions, They just took that full increase, right? This allows it to keep pace over time because if the rates go up, the rates don't go up the same amount on every single plan, right? So there may be a year where your base plan goes up 1% more than the average, maybe 2% less. But again, give or take, you're helping it to keep pace and make sure that it's, from a relative perspective, it's equal in value from year to year, both as I change in age and as the insurance company changes the rates on us.
I think that's important too, because half of the staff right now currently, we're disgruntled about the 7,000 contribution because it barely helped them with their benefit. And so that's why I mentioned my benefit being the highest in the organization. So it's important for us to know that we have to find a fine balance and balance both sides. Yes, will there be some people that will miss the 7,000 contribution? Yes, but I think overall we won't have as many problems as we did this past year, because we had the most experienced teacher actually completely opt out of our plan because she was going to pay thousands of dollars in monthly premiums. So she went on to her husband's, and her husband benefit wasn't nearly as good as what they needed it to be. So I do feel sorry for that scenario, and I may feel a little bit sorry for the scenario where a new employee doesn't have to pay anything because they're young, but now they have to pay a few dollars more, right, to help support the organization. So that's your job next Wednesday, to really help them understand that.
Yeah, and I think that it's important to understand too that when we talk about that younger employee might have to take on some cost, we're talking about, well, if you look at the blue side of the page again, right, you can see that I sorted the rates by age for that base plan. Now, that'll give you an idea of the disparity between older and younger employees. You can see the youngest one's 3-something and the highest one's 1,000-something, right? And you see that on the chart on the, yeah. So I think that's sort of the cornerstone of the suggestion here. But what that means in the context of what you just brought up, Dr. Bean, is that for that 22-year-old, if I want to buy up to the platinum plan, I'm buying up from 362 to 374. The buy up is much smaller because the base rate is lower, right? Now, I use those numbers just kind of jokingly, but the consequence, right? The impact to me is a lot less as a 22-year-old buying up from a gold to a platinum, and than it is if I'm 50 and 55, 60 and buying up, making that same transaction, right? And the other point that I think we had the staff feedback session the other day that I attended, and there were a couple comments on the contribution and the affordability of the benefits. I don't think that I was probably alone in noticing that the age played a factor in that, right? There weren't a lot of 20-year-olds that were commenting on that. We can't make that go away without more dollars, right? This redistributes the dollars in a more appropriate, in my opinion, a more appropriate way across age bands. Ultimately, you're not going to magically solve that bigger complaint. There's always going to be somebody that's going to complain and want more, right? Benefits are just simply part of your compensation package. And so we've got to figure out as an organization, the Royal We, how you divide that between salary and between PTO and between other, expenditures and kind of soft expenses and benefits, right? It's just part of the same math there. This is a way to not expand the pie, but just simply sort of redistribute it in a way that, again, that 22-year-old is not going to be happy about it, but I think it'd be really hard to argue in a meaningful way that it's not a fair change, right? And so I think that that's something that, I'm used to ducking and diving under fruit when people throw it at me during these meetings if it goes really badly, but more, in all seriousness, this is something that's that I would suggest it's consistent with most people's values, that it treats people fairly, and so I think that's a good type of change to make. It's a good type of frustration to deal with. Is that short-term pain of I wish I had more.
Is the current plan, as you just like, is it antiquated or? It seems to be a simple plan, right? Can you guys share your experience on us versus other schools that you've dealt with? Or?
I can speak from my experience, like with my onboarding with IIA. When I first saw the dollar amount, I was like, hey, that looks like it's going to work. But when you start doing the enrollment, because you don't see the formulas of actually what the cost of the actual plan is going to be, and then I have a dependent, it really was not something that was beneficial for me. And then when I came on board, I signed up anyway because I need it. But when I came on board, that was one of the first questions I was hit with the staff was, what about our benefits package? Can you fix that? And so I wanted to hear more of what they were saying. And the number one thing that I got out of it was the affordability and being able to cover their dependents. And I think that changing the strategy, it will help spread out those dollars a little bit evenly across all the employees within the organization. And I've also learned that we have some young teachers here that have growing families. So we're going to have more of those teachers going to have coverage for their dependents as well too.
And is this the model that your previous organization used?
Yes, this is the model that our previous organization used. And one of the things, caveats to it too, is it covers 100% of the employee. So whatever is left over, because some people will have, some of that allowance left over, you can use towards your dependents as well.
Yeah, and so let me explain that piece just to make sure it makes sense for everybody. The other change that was proposed as part of this is that we're going to introduce a couple of lower cost options, right? Right now we've got platinum and gold options, but given the contribution and just sort of the realities of what things cost, introducing some silver plan options. These metallic names, I know they just sound like marketing names, but they have meaning in this world, right? They're related to the actuarial value of these plans. A silver plan covers about 70% of costs for an average person in an average year. Gold is 80, platinum's 90, right? So they're meaningfully different. It's not like your credit card where, I don't know how much Diamond Extreme differs from Platinum Super Plus, but introducing a silver plan is going to have a rate differential of, maybe 7-8 points, something like that, as we introduce some, say a silver HMO. The two plans we proposed are a silver HMO on the Anthem side and a silver PPO on the Anthem side. So if I'm an employee that has this gold HMO as my base plan, and let's say that that's $450 a month, and I decide that I'm going to go into that silver plan instead and only use, say, 400 of those dollars, right? Then I could use that last $50 towards bringing out my kiddo or my spouse or partner, right? Ultimately, on the long term, all schools get a lot of pressure to cover dependents. The demographics of school, we work with a number of charter schools and a lot of affiliated organizations. I heard a familiar name in here tonight. And so we see the way that this plays out. Schools always have a lot of pressure to cover dependents. It's expensive, right? Because it costs just as much for a dependent as it does for the spouse is going to be essentially the same age, the same cost as the employee. We can't solve all those ills in one shot, but we can certainly look at that over time and kind of see how the first change plays out, and then talk about in subsequent years what we want to do to address those things. There's a lot of different ways to get there. I'll tell you that more broadly across our block of charter schools, what we see is that the flat dollar contribution works in large group. We have more than 100 employees, because now you move up to composite rates where it's employee, and spouse. And so it's not just by individual and by age. And so in that world, it's fine, right? It makes sense, because whether I'm, 32 or 62, anywhere in between, I'm going to pay that same, $473 for, an employee only, and that works, right? In our groups that are under 100 employees in the charter school space, it's much more broadly in general in that small group market, it makes less sense.
At Aspire, that's the plan we were.
You're over 100 employees.
Oh, we have 500 points. Yeah, and that makes a difference too. But
It is a
certainly,
difference.
yeah, but certainly it was. We paid for the employee at a baseline plan, and they decided from there. So
Yeah, statutory, you have to pay for an employee if they want. You have to cover them. We don't have to cover the family, but I think the policy of the board would be what we've always said, richest benefit within the budget. We can't have the richest benefit and blow out the budget.
Sure.
And so I think that's always been our policy. This is fascinating. It's probably better on the committee, honestly, but I love it. This is wonky. This is where I lived for many years, all the way down to HRAs and every other grade where you can solve it. I would just advise this. People don't know the difference between equity and equality. Just tell them what benefit they get at what age and why. And if they choose employee, they choose employee. If they want their family, it's this much more. We're giving you the best benefit we can with the budget that the board has given you. That's kind of my personal take, but we'll hear from some others. Go ahead and comment.
I'd also like to add, one of the other comments that stuck out to me with getting the input from the staff was the customer service of the current broker that we have. And I also experienced that as well too. I was not able to get any of my questions answered, and it was very difficult to even get on a phone call with someone. And my experience working, and I'm not just saying this because, you know, I work with Joe and his team, but I have to attest that they have helped out the staff where I came from, no matter what the question was.
That's super important.
Super,
Look, if
super
our
important.
employees can't figure out the plan and how to use it, why do people like Kaiser? Within 2 years, they
One-stop
figure it
shop.
out and it's a one-stop shop, right? It may or may not be the best, but they figure it out. Why do they dislike the, plan providers changing every year? It takes them 4 months to figure it out. We love it because usage is bad. Right? But that's not what we're going for as a board. Highest value within the budget. So I'm glad you found somebody who gives good service, because that's the name of the game. An employee calls you and passes on to them, I'm not figuring this out. I've got a surgery coming up.
Yes.
What's my portion? Is there a portion? What do I do? That's what we want to deliver that on. Because it's a retention tool.
So-
And that,
Yeah.
I apologize.
I was just saying, so because open enrollment for all of our staff is happening in September, we wanted to bring this forward to the board to make a decision on whether we should keep with our current plan, can contribute 7,000 to each employee, or go this route, right? And to have that discussion because when we present to the staff next week, we will have the direction of the board. And then they can go into open enrollment with their eyes open and understand.
So I might clarify as we get into that. It's an executive director decision. We will certainly do
Right.
anything you want to support you, to give our opinions. We can vote on it if you want. But it's fully within your purview. We've already set the budget. But we feel pretty good that you're asking us because you know what? Benefits, and particularly medical welfare benefits, are very emotional, highly charged, and we have opinions. And so just seeking out our opinion is really good, but it's your decision, clearly. But if you say, hey, would you make a motion and vote on something? I'll do it. I'll bring something to motion, but
Yeah, you want to explain the resolution and all that we.
Well, and again, the reason that part of the reason that this was brought up is because of the way that the handbook language states that, this is subject to the approval of the board. And so if that's misinterpreted or if it's being too broad of a brush that we're painting with here, so be it. Ultimately, the resolution that was proposed was, number one, to, of course, outlines all the whereas, but the core of it is to move to this new model to be able to promote equity with staff and to be able to support the broader initiatives of the spending in this area. And so it just simply would be for approval to both change the contribution strategy and introduce these 2 new plans. And I think that that's pretty straightforward, right? There's no downside to introducing the 2 new plans. There's no cost to the school. There's, at some illogical extreme, there's some marginal extra confusion if you offer too many plans, if you're offering distinctions without differences, but that's not the case here. We've got a handful of plans and meaningful distinctions between them. So that piece, I think, is not controversial at all. I think it's very consistent with the feedback that we got looking for more affordable healthcare options, right? And so, ultimately, the only piece that's worthy of discussion, really, and just whether it's straw poll or however else it's decided, is the piece about changing that contribution strategy, redistributing those dollars.
Yeah,
that would
so
be
it's
a
the,
resolution from the board.
well, yeah, it's the staff recommendation that we request approval for that resolution.
Okay, so
Do
I'm
you
looking
feel
at
like you have, seems like you have another meeting still, and
Well, the meeting with the staff is more to present the new strategy.
yeah, I guess, do you guys feel confident you have enough support from the staff to to proceed to offer this? And I can appreciate the story that you shared and then you heard from another, but do you feel like do you have enough to change the strategy here? Because that's what you're basically asking us to vote on, to change the
yeah.
strategy.
We have enough information to make a recommendation to change the strategy. Because we spoke with Joe and they know a lot more than we do, obviously. And we know more than certainly the average person because we're working with Joe. And so after hearing it actually for a third time, I'm even more convinced that we should recommend to go this pathway. Now, whether the staff, I don't know what the pulse of the staff will be other than it'll probably be the same as it was last year when we introduced the $7,000. Half of the staff said, great. Other half said it's not enough, right? It's going to be the same. I think though, the staff though, looks to us for the competency and expertise in that this is probably best for the organization.
Is it maybe helpful to connect the dots here so the staff feel like they're being heard? I guess this is really important, right?
Yeah.
This, because it just doesn't affect employees, it affects the dependents. And the key for me is that it's transparent, right? So everybody's clear what the impact to them will be. It looks like you've outlined something that everybody should be aware of what it is, so then they can make a decision if it's the right thing for them or not, and be able to voice that to you so you can collect that feedback and then make a decision based on the voices of the school. You'll always have some that agree and some that disagree, but I guess I'm wondering, do you have enough feedback this year?
Well, we had feedback in the general session.
We spoke with the leadership team.
And then I
first,
spoke with
and then
leadership.
We spoke at professional development with the entire organization.
And then I spoke with the leadership team again today. So that's 3 touch points we've had with the staff. And the next Wednesday, though, will be the first time we present then all of the data that they've given us into then formulating, okay, well, this is the strategy we would like to go down the path of, because based on what you guys have shared with us, in the past week.
With all due respect, if you take a straw poll of employees, I think you'll find very predictable results. I mean, if I were to suggest that I'm going to give you $1,000 and you $500 and you $300 and you $100, and I'm going to say, or we could give everybody, $400, and the person who was getting 1,000 before is probably not going to be super excited about that, right? The person who's getting $100 is going to love it, that idea. And so we're going to get sort of predictable feedback from that regard, right? You may have some defectors that, that see the greater good or kind of, feel that empathy or sympathy. But I would suggest that trying to manage I always go back to this idea of that group benefits are sort of like buying a suit off the rack, right? It's going to be a pretty good fit for most people. It's not the same as going down to, London and getting a bespoke suit made from scratch that fits you like a glove, right? It's meant to fit most people pretty well. And so you kind of have to go back to that idea of we're trying to take care of the staff in the best way possible in aggregate without leaving any just brutal outliers, right? We don't want to just sacrifice someone on the altar here. But this is, I think that if you just put it out to an employee vote, that you're not going to get necessarily meaningful feedback because it's pretty transparent about who's going to like it and who's not. If that's sort of the measuring stick that we want to use for determining whether or not to make the change, which is all right if it is.
Well, it's not. The intention is not. Yeah, intention is not to give.
I'm not suggesting you vote, or everybody raise your hand if you're for it. I'm just suggesting that before you're asking us to vote on something that I'm trying to get clarity on. If you have clarity yourselves that this is something that you definitely want to move forward with because you have the support in general of the staff that's here, because a lot of people are here on a different benefit plan, right? They came knowing it was this, and now we're changing it. So I'm wondering, are you going to have people that are very disgruntled, or it's changed now that you're changing something that's different from what they were used to before? We have no input here in terms of the staff and how they feel regarding the benefit plan. So really, to Doug's point, I agree. I think it's the executive director's decision, and we're happy to support your decision. But I feel a little bit in left field. They're voting on something that I don't feel connected to, although I know medical and benefits plans are extremely personal to people, and they should be aware of the cost impact to them.
Yeah, this actually brings up a good point that you may not have to vote on the resolution,
maybe you just pass a motion to support the executive director's a decision based on staff, input. So whatever direction we go based on that conversation, we can take it.
Because that handbook piece seemed to make it sound, that's what prompted this again, just to reiterate, the handbook language made it sound like this is a decision for the board. And so please correct me if I'm misstating, but what I think I heard was that, essentially a motion that just says, we empower the executive director to make this decision, using his best judgment and in coordination with, however you put that together, but something like that might be sufficient to help. Just make sure that the Ts are crossed and the Is are dotted there.
Yeah, because there is a clause in the handbook that says that we can make modifications to the handbook without formal board approval because you've already approved the handbook. And so I think that might be a better route is for you just to give the authority to the executive director along with his staff to determine the right course of action.
Yeah, or we give you the authority to make the decision, you make the decision, and then
We can do the
we can vote
resolution.
on the resolution here after that.
Language was.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the only time constraint on this is that if you want to implement this for the current benefit year, the open enrollment, so the meeting next week, just to clarify, is the meeting where we explain to employees, here's what you've got for the coming year. And you're always going to have a funny timing here because the start of the school year and when you're bringing teachers on does not coincide with your open enrollment. And it really cannot, that decision-making process, schools generally do this as teachers are coming back for October or November effective date, or they're doing it in the, in the spring, essentially, for sort of a late, early summer, late spring type of an effective date. Meaning that as a teacher, I'm either making this decision on benefits on the way out the door or on the way back in the door, but you have to have sort of a window where you get teachers in, you've got a daylight to be able to get in front of them, explain, here's your benefits for the year, collect those elections and get them into the carriers. And so we're always going to be in this funny time gap where we're either making a decision, quickly here, or where we're making a decision, 13 months out or something, to that extent, which is, is fine if that's, no one wants to be imprudent in the timing, but just be aware that that timing dynamic's always going to exist with this.
Yeah, I think if we started with this plan at the beginning, people kind of going eyes wide open.
Sure.
It's just when you make a change, you've got some teachers that carried over from before, you've got
Sure.
some new teachers. So the burden in my mind should be on the executive director because he carries the weight of the staff, right? Principal, executive director, president, and staff. So
Then you get your hand on the pulse there. If Dr. Bean, it seems like he's leaning this way, likes introducing these two options, he communicated to staff next week. When does it start? Does it start September 1 or?
The benefits start for October 1st.
October? Okay.
Yeah, so
they'll
September,
carry over what they've been doing for their returning employees.
right.
Still covering. Okay.
So essentially what happens is about 2 months out, we sort of have these discussions at the company level, at the, at the school level to talk about it as a strategy from an executive perspective, what makes sense. About 30 to 45 days out, we meet with teachers and with the staff in general to explain, here's your options for the coming year. They go through a portal where it automatically calculates their deductions. So no one's gonna be surprised by just seeing the next pay stub and finding out, oh my gosh, this changed, I had no idea. Especially when there's a change like this would be what we call an active enrollment, where every employee must say yay or nay, right? So they're gonna have to say, yes, I want to keep the same benefits, or I'd like to make changes to my benefits, or I'm waiving benefits still, or whatever it is, right? So we have an active response from every employee who signed elections. And, again, that portal calculates out those deductions for them. So they can see the real impact of this on their selection. Does that make sense?
is this actual as well as it is now, or is it the
So
employees from last year, or?
So based on there were 22 employees when we started, I don't know what it was, maybe a month ago that we started putting these exhibits together. Those are the actual ages, actual plan elections, actual family status for all of those plans. The only difference between on the yellow page there is the left side shows the renewal rates, not the current rates. The rates will be in effect in October. And the right side of the page, also shows that. It's just the only difference between those two charts is the funding mechanism.
Okay, Kismet, if you could read the clause in the employee handbook.
And this is what brought this about, because it's stated in the employee handbook. It says by board action, the cap of employees' medical, dental, vision insurance benefits is $7,000 total per school year. employees are fully responsible after $7,000.
It was that board action piece that made us think that this needed to come to you all.
Here, I'm glad. So that probably will get modified then in based on these two options.
Correct.
And it'll be a flat 7,000, it will be tailored to the plan they choose and their age they are.
Yeah, and you know, we've included some in the resolution, in the proposed resolution, we included some draft language. It says that the school will contribute up to 100% of the employee only rate for this particular plan, to be used only for this particular type of plan, right? You know, I mean, just sort of a draft language.
This explains it. I get it, but then I live in this. too.
So have we review this language with our legal?
We didn't send it to our legal because, where did we get this from?
Are you referring to what's in
The
the
resolution.
resolution?
Yeah.
No, we did not.
But where did we get the resolution from though? I thought, was it?
So some of that, it was a combination of language that Kismet and I'm not sure if that was involved in some of that. I think I saw your name in the chain maybe at one point and that I put together. So, you know, it could be made more generic if you felt more comfortable with that, but ultimately
Well, I
this
think
is.
I like what Brett was suggesting before is that we give our executive
Yep.
director the support and authority to make a decision. And when this, run this through our legal one, and we tweak it, they let us. Planning to then, you know, post, we'll just make it our resolution.
Yeah.
And
But
that
today we-
also is written in the resolution as well to the give the executive director the authority to, you know, make changes as needed based on the organizational needs.
And I think that one other advantage of that is because we talked about that this is meant to be perpetual in nature. I mean, obviously budgets come and go. And so this is something that can be changed again in the future if need be. But the idea would be that it's hopefully evergreen. And so wording it in that way, you know, the proposal was such that the executive director can find the equivalent plan for the coming year. So kind of find about the same benefits if you change between Anthem and Shield, you know, so that you're not coming back here and sort of going through minutia every time you need to tweak that handbook. I think you want to be a little bit more broad in the handbook language maybe than specify a carrier and name and date.
Maybe the way the action item is written could be a motion where the board moves to have the executive director maintain authority to implement a new employer contribution strategy for health and welfare. You know, and we could get to the specific language in the next time we're together.
Sure.
You might have to wordsmith this a little bit. I think it fits this. Let me try a motion. Let's see. I would move.
Wait a minute, wants to hear what I think.
Yes. Always room out for
Before you do
emotion.
that. Before you do that. So change is always pain, right? And fortunately, when looking at this, it's unfortunate that we didn't have, I mean, I like the tiered program as opposed to the way it is now, where everybody's just the same. It's obvious that senior employees, as they move up the line, are gonna have more costs. I mean, there's nobody that can't recognize that. And if they don't recognize it, they will in a couple of years when they're the senior employee. Right? The senior.
Sneaks up on you.
And as a senior employee, it's nice to have that coverage, to have that, well, a little bit more money as you move up the line, you know, right? Younger guys, you know, yeah, maybe that you have that scenario where the younger guy bought the gold package, the platinum plus package, and they only use pennies of it, right?
Right.
So when their benefit goes down, and if they don't choose a lower package, then they gotta pay for it, right? And that's gonna be a different taste in the mouth, right? They're gonna say, oh, maybe I should pick the bargain basement, right?
Sure.
And I don't need that, right? So I would say that overall, this is a better plan. Because it rewards our senior employees as they move up the line, and as they go to this. And that's not abnormal in business, right? That's what happens in businesses, right? So this unfortunately should have been the way we were doing it from the very beginning. Bite the bullet, make the change. That's what I say. You know, I appreciate what you're saying, that, you know, you are affecting the people, their families and dependents and all those different
people. But you know what? If I'm looking at this side of it here, then it's kind of 50-50. Some of them will benefit a lot. Some of them, hopefully those that benefit the most are the senior ones, and some of them that we're buying the premium plus package don't need it. I say we go with this one. It's hard, but that's why we have Dr. Moon to explain. And we don't have to.
That's right.
But yeah, I gotta go. It's gonna be tough. But after this year, it is gonna be tough. Hopefully, yeah. I won't say the second part of what I was saying, but yeah, I say do it. Do it, move on. Do it, move on. It's gonna be painful, but not for everybody.
So just to clarify, so they do get to choose, right? Once they explain it.
Yes.
So, okay.
And also the good thing too about this is there's a platform for enrollment. It's called Ease, where each employee can go in and you can select whatever plan you're looking at, and you will see in real time what your deduction will be per paycheck. So if you see something, oh, that's not gonna fit my budget, then you can, play with the other different plans to select and compare, do a comparison and so forth. So, and then you can always call Joe's team for extra assistance.
And to give it, I'm sorry, please go ahead.
I was just saying that, give Miller just a chance. He may or may not have a comment on this. He lives in a country that operates a little different. It's a national health
All of
plan
them do.
in Canada. Miller, any comments from you?
No, it's very comprehensive. Thank you.
Welcome to California.
That's why.
Just the last thought, just to kind of give a sense of scale here. If we look at the youngest employee on here, right, who's potentially has the most to lose, that person is talking about having to spend another $60, $65 to buy up back to the platinum plan a month, right? So they've got $30 a paycheck or so, they've got to squeeze out, depending if they're a 10 or 12 month employee. On the other end of the spectrum, the older employees, if you look at the oldest employee on there, they're getting about another $600 a month, right? So right now, that's $600 just to get to this base plan that they're coming out of pocket for, right? So to give you a sense of scale, it's the people that it impacts that are losers are losing a little, and the people that win, some of them win a lot. And so there are going to be winners and losers, and there is going to be some complaining. We should all, no one should be Pollyanna-ish about that, but I think it's a good change, though. It's worth ripping off the Band-Aid.
Yeah, it's ripping off the Band-Aid. That's what it is. No doubt about it. Now, I rip off Band-Aids all the time. So, but that's why I did this way. We're gonna do it.
Other thoughts, Brad?
I'll second
So we have a choice to move to approve the resolution as is. Not opposed to that because it's pretty innocuous in my opinion. I don't see trouble in it anywhere. Or to do that simpler resolution to authorize our executive director to make the decision, and then when the language is perfect and reviewed, we'll come back and review it. Any leaning on that from anybody? Preference?
My service is the latter, just because we're removed. I'd rather be the executive director and support his decision, but I think the onus is on him.
And then on the,
this one,
then on the back end,
we vote to
do that. Now, let me craft that in very close to what was here, so I don't violate the fact that we're putting in a different topic than we were. It's all the same. I'll move in that we give our executive director, along with the staff, the opportunity to choose the employer contribution strategy for health and welfare plans. Second, okay. We'll do a roll call vote, left to right. Molly?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Miller?
Yep.
Thank you, Brad. Aye. And
Yes.
so that's what we'll do. Thank you. This is really nice to include us in this.
What day is the talk?
Wednesday?
Wednesday?
Yep.
And Kismet, thank you for bringing your.
Next Wednesday.
Yeah, I had about 5 years of doing this every year to optimize and to, if I could, stay within the providers that we have. And it's a challenge. We know what pressure you're under.
Yeah, I would only add, if we have a choice on vendors, let's work with vendors that are responsive. Make sure they answer all our questions. If we don't have that and we have other choices, let's explore those other choices. So I appreciate your support. Thank you.
It's good insight. That brings satisfaction with people, so.
And I would add, I think that you're right on line, we are a smaller school. We are talking about people, so at this point, I come from a company with 66,000 employees. I'm just a number. They have 400 people. It is different. So I think you're right.
547-601. That was my IBM number. Forget it.
Yeah, so I think you're right.
That's great.
Let's just do it.
Great discussion, and thank you, Joe. I
Of course.
appreciate your leading and guidance on that. Brings us to closing items. We'll do round robin for any board comments or with our executive director or one another. Miller, online, any comments for our executive director or other board members?
Another great year that we're looking forward for. Go for it.
Off to a good start, that's true. We go, Felipe.
Do you want me to go first? Are you
Well,
sure?
well,
No, go with Molly, because I got.
Okay, yeah, you work Molly, for board members or Dr. Bean?
Well, yes, Dr. B and all the staff and I'm just so excited. I look forward to this new year. I was already so fortunate that I was able to participate in some days in the retreat. And I feel like more and more like this is my home. So I look forward to spending more time. And so thank you for all your hard work.
Yeah, that's nice. I can't add anything to it. That was just said so perfectly. So I'm just gonna say I'm content.
I just want to commend the staff here for really working hard. It's not easy to adjust from year one for having so many kids and switch staff to year two, to scale down to year three now, scaling back up. And so thank you for all that the team is doing here. It really shows off very well. Thank you.
So it's here on the first day, and I don't know what you saw, but I thought things were going well, very well. There's a lot of parent volunteers out, out in front, helping the new students get into that. Yeah, I know there's a little bit of confusion, but minimal in my opinion. Everything else went smoothly. Kudos to you and the team and everything. And then with the second day and so on and so on. I think as days go on, it'll be a lot even smoother, right? If it gets there where they belong, right? Everybody knows what they do. Okay, so there is that. Now, two, we had a parent here last year, Patricia, who I think is how you say her name. They left, they moved to Taiwan. Okay, but before she left, I told her, I said, while you're there, find me a school, a sister school that we could partner with, right? She sent me an email today.
Oh, wow, great.
Okay, the partner school in Taiwan
Nice.
that wants to partner with us. They've spoken to the board, they're ready to action to make this happen. So my question is to you, who do I send this email to? It's not gonna be me, right?
No, so that's a big.
So we start with you.
Yep.
They need a board member. Well, they said they want some kind of letter, blah, blah, blah. I'll let you read it. They need like invitation, something. You'll read it and probably connect with one of our staff members, put them in charge. Or if you need me as a board member to sign off something, let me know and keep me in the loop of this and I look forward to it.
Great. Yes.
Okay, number 2 item was I have been trying food. And it's a little better than.
Oh, that's good.
Just so you know. Okay, it's only been 4 days or something like that. That's good. So, all right, number 3. I don't have the calendar right here, but we do get the 4th of July, right?
4th of July, yes.
Yes, we get the 4th of July, national holiday.
Yes.
About Independence Day, America. We
Absolutely.
benefit from all of that.
Yes,
correct?
sir. Yes.
We also get Memorial Day, right?
Yes.
Memorial Day, our warriors, fighting, all that. Labor Day,
Yep.
President's Day, all those are are days that we get out, we benefit from here as a school.
Yes.
Why are they not doing the Pledge of Allegiance in the morning?
Because we just started, we do it in the assembly. Well, we also have Irvine Virtual Academy. So the PA system goes into their system. So we have to try to figure out a way to only do the PA system into our school. And we do the Pledge of Allegiance through the PA system.
I'll give you some advice.
Yeah.
Half the kids do one in every classroom.
I like that. Yeah. Yeah.
You know, the parent here.
That's good.
Patriot, I want to see, you know, I pitch that to every parent that I try to get to the school.
You're right.
I pitch that to them. So I'd like to see them doing it in the classroom at the very least. On Friday, I volunteer to be here to help to do that, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd like to see that going on. Right. Oh, last thing. First year, we had some cultural event, you know, Asian, I'm gonna call it Asian cultural event, which was the lion dance program. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yeah.
So the lion dance, the tiger dance, or whatever it was, and actually Dr. Watson and I were actually on the adult lion dance team. I don't know if you knew that. But I was wondering if we could have something similar like that, a ping pong team. What do you think about that?
And then who would we compete?
That's not a problem. We get something going.
Let's talk,
What
man.
do you think about that?
I like it. What's that?
We got.
Yeah, Felipe donated a beautiful big pong table over there. So, I mean, he's ready to go.
I would volunteer to be coordinator.
I like
And
that.
get that kind of going. Would it be something, you're not opposed to that, right?
No,
We get that kind of-
we're doing a lot of competitions. One of them is the basketball invitation this year. So if you can find us an invitation for our kids to get ready for.
I would like to like, just get a practice thing going, you know, maybe get something going with their parents and the kids. I think we should get a lot of support with that. Under the theme of what is the Asian component of that.
Right.
We have something just like we had, well, it won't be just like the line dance thing, because I think that was very culturally appropriate, you know. I think that the ping pong thing would be big.
All right.
I want to make that happen. I'll talk to you more about that.
Let's
That'll
do
be
it.
the other email I sent.
Okay. Ready.
That's it. That's it.
Great thoughts. So that brings us to adjournment of the meeting. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn. Brett, good job. Molly is a second, so we'll start left to right. Molly?
Yes.
And Doug is a yes. Miller, motion to adjourn?
Yes.
Brett, aye. And Felipe.
Yes.
And we'll thank Mary Beth and the team, and thanks for everybody who participated tonight and who will watch later on. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
I'll take all those contracts. Before
Hi, Miller.
Take care of that.
So, yeah, so what happens procedurally is that you assign